All right, so today we're doing a deep dive into something that you might not expect, aesthetics.
Okay.
But, and I know when you hear that word, you're probably thinking like art galleries and, fancy sculptures and things like that.
Right.
But we're actually talking about aesthetics in a totally different context today. We're taking it straight to your Google search bar.
Interesting. Yeah.
So have you ever thought about your Google business profile, for example, as a work of art?
Hmm. Not really. No.
Well, get ready to, because it might be more important than you think. At least that's what this deep dive is going to get at. And it's based on the work of Alex Hawke.
Okay.
And he has this super interesting background in stage production and lighting design, specifically at the ZKM Center for Art and Media, which is in Germany.
And ZKM, for those who might not know, it's a really, really well-known spot for kind of being this really forward-thinking space for like digital art and media and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So it's not just theory, right? He's bringing like real-world experience to this whole digital realm, which I think is really, really fascinating.
Totally. And that's what I thought was so cool about this, because I personally would have never, ever made the connection between aesthetics and, what we see when we do a Google search. But that's exactly what Hawke is doing. Like,
Right.
he's actually saying even something as simple as a Google search result, whether you click on one link versus another,
Hmm.
can benefit from what he calls good aesthetic.
And he would argue that's because, aesthetics are about so much more than just beauty. Like, it's not about just looking pretty. It's about evoking feelings, responses, creating impact.
Right.
And that totally translates into the digital world, even if you don't always realize it.
Yeah.
And he uses the example of like a really well-crafted stage performance.
Yeah.
It's not about things looking pretty for the sake of it. It's about using those visual elements to actually impact the audience, to create an atmosphere, to, you know what I mean, to really draw you in.
And you know what? That actually makes me think about, I saw this one play a couple of years ago, and I can't remember what it was called, but there was this one scene. It was clearly like a pivotal scene in the play, and they had these really intense red lights.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like you could just feel the tension in the audience. It was all about the lighting.
Right. Like everything about how that was designed was meant to evoke a certain feeling. Right.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm assuming that's kind of what Hawke is getting at here. It's like, yeah, a stage designer will use lighting to evoke a certain emotion. Hawke would argue that digital spaces can be designed to do the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about being intentional with those elements and recognizing that they have an impact, whether we're talking about a stage or a screen.
So what you're saying is like my website, for example, is basically like my own personal stage.
In a way, yeah, you're the director. You get to set the scene. You choose the elements that will make people feel a certain way.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where Hawke draws this really interesting comparison between a stage production
Okay.
and something that many of us probably see every single day, the Google Knowledge Card.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, not exactly the first thing that comes to mind when I think of like visually stunning. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. It's pretty basic.
It's very, very simple.
And Hawke uses that very stark contrast to actually make a point.
Okay.
He's saying that even something as streamlined and, let's be honest, kind of visually, like not that stimulating, as a knowledge card can actually benefit from aesthetic optimization.
Wow.
It's about clarity of communication, he would say.
So how does that work with something like the knowledge card where, it's already designed to like deliver information quickly? It's
Right.
meant to be simple.
It's all in the presentation.
Okay.
So think about it this way. Let's say you're looking up a new restaurant online.
Okay.
Are you more likely to click on the knowledge card that has a grainy, poorly lit image, or the one with like a really beautiful, crisp, professional-looking photo of their food?
Totally. The second one.
Right. Like even something as simple as that can really influence your perception of something.
That's so true. Because like I am way, way more likely to like trust a business that I find online if their photos look good.
Of course, because it signals something to you, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly it.
Totally.
It's like Hawke would say, it's like we're instinctively drawn to strong visuals, even if we don't always realize it.
Right.
It's about capturing attention. It's about, in a way, building trust through strong visuals.
So are we saying that a website with like a super chaotic layout and like blurry photos, for example, is like the digital equivalent of a play with terrible lighting and a confusing set?
Well, Hawke might say it's not far off.
Why?
Remember that feeling, and you're talking about that play.
Yeah.
Remember that sense of unease, confusion, whatever it was that you felt.
Right.
That's the kind of feeling that, like, poor aesthetics can evoke online, too.
Huh. Okay.
Think about it. Have you ever, like, clicked away from a website because it just felt off, but you couldn't really put your finger on why.
Oh my God, yes, all the time.
Right. Maybe the colors were weird or the text was impossible to read or something like that.
Oh, yes. There's this one website, I can picture it right now. I'm not going to name any names, but it was like a rainbow threw up all over my screen.
Yeah.
And the text was so tiny, I like practically needed a magnifying glass to read it.
Right. And you just wanted to get out of there.
I couldn't click away fast enough.
Exactly.
Right. Huh.
And that's precisely Hawk's point. Like, we might not always consciously think about these things, but they play a huge, huge role in how we experience and engage with, like, the online world.
This is kind of blowing my mind
Right.
because I'm sitting here thinking it's like, okay, so it's not just about being pretty. It's like it's about using aesthetics to actually like guide our experience, I guess.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is where Hawk's background in theater comes in so handy because, he would
Right.
argue that even though a stage production and a Google search result might use totally different tools,
Yeah.
lights and music versus pixels and text and all that,
Right.
they actually have the same goal in mind, which is clear, engaging communication that sticks with you.
So whether I am like directing a play or if I'm, designing my website or whatever, it's about creating that memorable experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's about understanding the subtle ways that aesthetics can really influence our emotions and then using that to your advantage.
Okay, so I'm very curious. How do we actually make those principles work for us in the digital space? Like, what are we doing with this knowledge?
Well, let's get into it. Well, I think it all comes down to intentionality,
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
just like a stage director will carefully choose every element of the production.
Right.
We can be just as deliberate with our, online presence.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
Hawk's point is we shouldn't just be like throwing things online haphazardly and hoping for the best.
So instead of me just like, snapping a picture on my phone and immediately posting it to my website, I need to think about like, okay, what is the message I'm sending with this? How is this going to make people feel? All that kind of stuff.
Exactly, yeah. Like, are you, for example, let's say you're a photographer, right?
Okay.
And you're building a website to showcase your work.
Mm-hmm.
Are you showcasing photographs that, maybe have a consistent style or editing, something that really reflects your brand? Or is it just kind of like random photos thrown up there?
Right. Okay.
Is the layout of your website clean and easy to navigate? Or is it like cluttered with too many images and clashing fonts?
Okay, that makes a lot of sense because it's kind of like, if you're putting on a play, it's like you have a cohesive theme, like everything from the costumes to the set design,
Yeah.
it should all work together to create this specific atmosphere, right?
Exactly, yeah. And Hawk would argue that this kind of attention to detail, not only does it create a more like aesthetically pleasing experience, but it also builds trust with your audience. And that's where this concept of social proof comes in.
Okay, so tell me more about this social proof thing because I feel like I've heard of it before, but I'm not sure I totally like get it.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it's a really fascinating psychological phenomenon,
Okay.
but basically it means that we're more likely to trust something if it looks like other people already trust it.
So like if I'm walking down the street and I see a restaurant that has a line out the door, I just assume the food must be good.
Exactly. Or if you're like shopping online and you see a product and it has hundreds of positive reviews,
Right.
you're probably going to be more likely to buy it than like the one that only has like 3 reviews, even if it's like the same price or whatever.
Right. Okay, so how does that tie back to aesthetics though?
Well, think about it this way. Let's say you're looking for, I don't know, like a financial advisor online or something, right?
Okay.
And you come across 2 different websites.
Mm-hmm.
One of them has this really sleek, modern design.
Okay.
It's got like really professional headshots of, the advisors,
Okay.
and it's got testimonials from like well-known clients, right?
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
And then the other website looks like it was designed like in the early 90s, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's got like blurry photos and there are typos in the text and
Yeah, I'm definitely going with option number one.
right. And Hawk would say that's social proof in action because that first website, even if it's offering like the exact same services as that second one,
Right.
it just appears more trustworthy, right?
Right.
Because aesthetically it's aligned with what we've come to expect from, a reputable business.
It's that first impression, and it all comes down to that first impression.
Exactly. Yeah.
And in the online world, aesthetics can totally make or break that first impression.
Totally. Yeah. And this applies to, pretty much all areas of our kind of like digital lives these days. It's
Yeah.
like everything from our social media profiles to,
Right.
even our online dating profiles now.
Yeah.
Hawk would say that by, applying these principles of like aesthetic intentionality,
Hmm.
we're not just, making things pretty or whatever.
Right.
We're actually communicating something about ourselves
Okay.
and hopefully, building trust along the way.
So it's almost like, we're all like curators of our own like personal brands online. Like we get to choose how we present ourselves to the world.
Right.
And those choices, they actually like really do matter.
They do. They do. And just like, a museum curator is going to carefully select and arrange pieces to tell a story.
Right.
We can use aesthetics to kind of shape the narrative of our, online presence.
Wow. Okay, this is a lot to process, but I'm curious. So we've talked about how this applies to, things like websites and online profiles,
Right.
but what about other forms of digital communication? Like does this whole aesthetics thing apply to like emails too?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
And you know what? Hawk doesn't really dive into that specifically in his work,
Okay.
but
So what you're saying is even my inbox could use like a makeover.
right.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah, have you never gotten like an email that's just like a wall of text?
Ugh. Yeah.
No paragraphs, no visuals, nothing.
No, like I just hit delete. I don't even.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So even though Hawk doesn't like specifically talk about emails,
Right.
it stands to reason that like these same principles could totally apply.
Interesting. Okay. So I should be thinking about, clear visuals, concise text, maybe even like what font I'm using in my emails.
Maybe so.
Wow. Okay. My inbox is about to become like a work of art.
There you go.
Okay. Well, this whole conversation has honestly been such an eye-opener for me, because I always thought of aesthetics as being so subjective,
Right.
like what one person finds beautiful, somebody else might think is, whatever. But are you saying that there's actually like a science to it?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a whole field of study,
Oh, wow.
dedicated to understanding like how our brains respond to visual stimuli.
Really?
Yeah. For example, like, did you know that studies have shown that people are more likely to trust websites that use cool tone color palettes,
Really?
like blues and greens,
Huh.
as opposed to like warm tones like reds and oranges?
Wow. No, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So even like subtle things like that, like our color choices can actually have a big impact.
Huge impact.
Wow.
And that's really Hawk's like main takeaway here. Like, we can't underestimate the power of aesthetics
Yeah.
in the digital world.
It's about being intentional. It's about, like you were saying, understanding these underlying principles and then using that to actually like communicate more effectively.
Yeah. It's exactly.
Wow. It's like Hawk is giving us like the secret code to creating like digital experiences that really like resonate with people.
Yeah. And it's not, it's not just about like boosting your website traffic or getting more likes on social media or whatever.
Right.
It's about creating a more, human-centered online experience.
Yeah.
One that feels intentional, one that feels considered.
This has been amazing. Honestly, this whole deep dive has really made me rethink how I approach like my own online presence.
Good.
I'm going to make some changes.
It's definitely given us a lot to think about,
It has.
which I think is, the mark of a really good like exploration of a topic, right?
Yeah,
It leaves you with more questions than answers.
totally, totally. Well, listeners, we're going to leave you with this. What can you do today to start applying these principles of aesthetics to your own little digital corner of the world? Maybe it is finally giving your website that refresh, or choosing more compelling visuals for your social media, or finally making your email signature look really, really good.
Right.
Whatever it is, just remember aesthetics aren't just about, just being pretty. It's about communicating effectively and creating those experiences that really resonate.
Right.